Hello.
What's up? By the way, I don't know. Are we focused on the slide right now or us? What's the
I don't.
production
It's a
looking
great
like?
question. I think it's just us.
We got these super cool NASA shirts made.
Ooh.
I know. Our marketing team is undefeated. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, always, a little overwhelmed, a little, what's the word I'm looking for? As Willy Wonka would put it, I have so little to do and so much time. No, wait, strike that, reverse it.
Well, I hear that. I hear that for
I don't
sure.
use the word busy
I don't
because
like it.
busy is infinite,
Right.
but honestly, if you're not busy, are you working hard enough? Is also the thing that comes to my mind.
Uh, I'm just making sure to give everybody a little bit of time to arrive and double checking. If you see me looking down, it's because I've got the chat open, so we'll be able to keep an eye on your questions. Please say hello in the chat so I can see you. I can see who's here.
I'm so used to doing these where all the mics are hot. Can't have people screaming at us.
I mean, not till the end, right? Uh, okay, we're gonna wait probably just one more minute before we get started.
And I'm totally going to be whoring out Rejection Con about 400 times during this.
That's okay. Avic's sponsoring it, so go right ahead.
It's funny though, is like it's a charity event, so I don't have to feel like I'm shilling in a way that's going to have me flamed on Reddit like I normally get flamed on Reddit. It's the go ahead and flame me if you hate helping kids learn technology and become your future employees.
Are you even doing Reddit right though if you're not getting flamed? I don't know if that's not just
I
part of the
don't know.
equation.
I,
Yeah.
I did something fun the other day where Chris Day of ScalePad, IT Glue, Top Down Fund, he posted something on Reddit or on LinkedIn about like the customer is always right. So I said, huh. So I had GPT with deep analysis turned on, and I said, go act as if you were the zeitgeist of Reddit slash RMSP and answer the question, is the customer always right? What do you think it came back with, Amanda?
I would be surprised if there wasn't swearing involved. Considering it's Reddit. I mean, Reddit is it's
Cesspool.
the venting therapy session. I'm putting a positive spin on it here for everyone in the space. So yeah.
As the
Just get
spicy Monday guy, I will say exactly what it said is, well, the way RMSP would apply to that is F the customer, that fire them.
yeah.
They are wrong. You are right. Uh, and it gave statistics like how many times it was mentioned in the last like year and a half. And I was like, ooh, there's my next spicy Monday post. So stay
Well, we'll
tuned.
look forward to that, right? All right, we're going to get going here, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We have a really interesting topic to me today. And you know what's funny is we'll get into it in a second, but I think this is one of these things where you think you've heard everything. I don't know. We'll see. So the topic is how MSPs can use data to drive smart decisions. I love data. I also know that Kyle likes data, but not this in the same way. So this is going to be an interesting, there might be some spicy takes within it as well. So let's dive in. There's going to be slides, but the slides are not as informational as the stuff that we're saying. So feel free to write notes or ask questions. Uh, all right. So who are we? I mean, I feel like I need an introduction, but I don't know if Kyle does. I don't know if that's just me and my impression, but my role at Aubic is MSP field strategist, and I like to explain this. I basically go out into the field and I learn what people love or would like to change about the product and bring that internally, as well as teach people internally, what MSPs want, considering that I still co-own an MSP. And then externally, I just talk in really educational spaces, exactly like we're going to do today, in order to help people think about things maybe they haven't thought about in their business before or in new ways. And that way, we're making the ecosystem better overall. And I do that both in my role at Auvik, but also being a community lead and member champion with MSP Geek and GTIA. Kyle, I could talk about you, but do you want to talk about yourself?
Honestly, I think I kind of want you to talk about me because I think that would be fun. I mean, the simple thing for me is I've been in the channel forever at this point. I'm finally at that point where I think I say the shit where people are like, yeah, we've heard you say that 10 years ago. And I'm like, oh, crap, I'm that guy now. But anywho, ex MSP guy, just like all of you. My genesis was a little bit different though, as I'm more of a business strategy person than I am a tech. I was never technical. Still to this day, I am not technical. I'm actually allergic to technology in many ways. Like I'm all into analog crap, like film cameras and using pen and paper, and like if you want, I have vinyl records. Like crying out loud, I am such an old man. But anywho, had some success. I had a hypergrowth MSP. What that means in layman's terms is we went from about 15 employees to 150 employees in a matter of about 3.5 years. And we did that all organically, no M&A at all. So going against the zeitgeist, you do not need to grow through M&A. But beyond that, I created an MSP consulting firm called Sierra Pacific Group, became MSP Plus. We had about 60 consultants on staff. That was my big claim to fame, helping MSPs just get their stuff together. And data was a core component of that because in being a business coach for the last, God, 10, 15 years now, Amanda, I can't tell you how often I would look at these business operating systems like EOS and scaling up. And the first thing I would recognize in going into a planning day, no one knew how to pick a direction because they didn't understand the data in their business to know if their direction was reasonable or not.
Mm-hmm.
For example, where do you want to be in 5 years? $100 million, Kyle. Well, you're 2 million right now. So are you
Yeah.
willing to have some sleepless nights for the next 5 years? Oh, well, tell me why I can't get there. Okay, let's get the whiteboards out and the Excel charts out.
Yeah. I mean, that's the reality is like a lot of people get into this industry because they're a bit of a maverick. Being an MSP requires you to wear all these different hats, whether you're on the technical side or the one who's owning the company. You have to put on these different personas, different skill sets, and just attack things that maybe you hadn't done before. And that can very much, when you see even a modicum amount of success, lead you to believe that you have all the answers. And unfortunately, I think that that's a misnomer. It means that you're very smart and that you have good discernment, but there's only so much, only so far that will take you. So, kind of what we're talking about through here is data can help. Data can reaffirm your gut and what it is that you're looking at and help guide you. So, let's kind of get into it. So I wanted to start off with this because when Kyle and I were first talking, I mean, I think I've done the most promotion for this webinar than I have for any of the other ones that I've done. And it's because I'm extremely passionate about it. But I had a lot of pushback from people like, oh, we know this, we do this, we've heard it before, we already know, like we took what we wanted and we left. And the thing is that I know from being a part of peer groups and accountability groups that sometimes you have to hear something 15, 20, 30 times and it's the same thing that you hear, but where you're at in your journey is different at that time. So you might get something different in that particular moment. So I would encourage you that if you think you have it on lock, just keep an open mind for number one. And number two, I think share then in the comments what it is that you're doing that you think works well so that other people can learn from you because that's the reality is we're all crowdsourcing how we do this. And it doesn't matter what some firm out there tells you about how it should be. Like we learn the most from each other. The conversations that we have in the hallways, the stuff that we're able to share notes on. This is the real learning, the real teachings from people on the ground. I mean, would you agree, Kyle?
Yeah, and what I was going to say to your last comment is the one thing I have recognized in business more than anything is there's no right answers. There is no best practice. There's just average. There is case studies, and there are averages of case studies because I can tell you right now, there are some MSPs in our channel today that are growing $10 million a year ARR, and they don't do any of the best practices at all. And for that can be very jarring, especially to the entrepreneur that starts an MSP, because when you're technical and you were like the IT manager or IT support person, you're a nonconformist. So this plays really well to starting an MSP. However, when you go to grow and scale things, you almost have to become a conformist because now you have employees and those employees need to do things, but the things that they need to do need to have a result that benefits the organization in a way that may not tickle your funny bone. And what I mean by that is it doesn't matter how clean and hygienic sometimes your clients' environments are we making money?
Yeah.
And that's not natural to a lot of us.
No, I mean, it could actually be counterproductive for some of us. It's like against our nature, but alas, business is that way. So when I thought about this, I was like, the reality is there's not really a lack of data, right? The data's there. I would say that much like the tickets that come in from a help desk, you can actually drown from it, right? There's so many things that you could look at. And, there's a webinar that you join in and say, is this, this is the thing you should be paying attention to. This is the one thing that's going to make a difference in your business. And I think what you need to hear, basically, just what Kyle said there and what I'm about to say here, is that the stuff that we're going to talk about today is not prescriptive. You being the person who chooses your own destiny in your MSP means that you need to set these things for yourself. I'm not going to subscribe to one specific way to do it. We're going to teach you how to do it in a way that's going to make change, right? Not exactly what to change, but how to make change, if that makes sense. So, when you are doing any of these things, you need to ask yourself the following. So, what outcome do they tie back to? And I know that Kyle has a lot to say about that because when we were doing this planning thing, like there's something specific that he said. So I'm going to give him space to talk about that in a sec. But let's go through the rest of the list. So, is the right person in charge of measuring them? The person has to be able to affect change. You can't just hand somebody something where they can't actually do anything about it. It's like asking your account manager to be responsible for service when they're not managing the service department. Does the team understand how they personally affect it? Do they know what measures and things that they do that, will actually move the needle on these things? And is the goal like clear and attainable? Like what Kyle said before about, being $100 million company. I mean, that's not attainable if you start out at 2 million easily without some absolutely insane amount of work. You need to break that down. So I would love to encourage you to share your thoughts on outcome there, Kyle, because I loved what you had to say.
Yeah, and by the way, I didn't recognize what I'm about to say for probably about 5 to 10 years in my own trajectory as kind of a business person. So I want to whiteboard this, and I don't know if it's going to show correctly, Amanda. We might have to unshare the PowerPoint deck so people can
Yeah,
see it.
I'll go ahead. Let's
But
do that.
but can you see the whiteboard?
I can through yours, but if you want to go ahead and
Awesome.
share, but nonetheless, it's
Okay,
pretty
yeah.
big, so it's not too bad.
Yeah, as long as people can see it and they focus on the speaker on the view on Zoom, that'll probably work. But anywho, there is a weird thing when it comes to measuring something. And I akin it to a food pyramid because at the very base of the layer, you have a system. That's going to be whatever holds the data. Like this literally can be the pen and paper ledger for your books. This doesn't have to be a tool, but for many of us as an MSP, right, this could be the PSA. And then in those systems, you have another layer, which is going to be data. This is going to be the actual markers inside of that system that means something. For example, this could be a time entry. Now, above that, we have something that we used to use in my time in retail, which was really the end all be all before kind of the modern way of running business. And this is where you get metrics. Now, metrics are any time that you need to average or do some type of math problem to two data points. There's no math involved in the data layer. The math comes in at the metrics layer. So this could be something like number of hours because I need to add up all of the time entries. The next layer, this is where you have the scaling up principles that appeared in the mid 90s. Key performance indicator. This is anytime you're doing math problems with two metrics. So this is then could be like percent utilization is something that we love here in the IT channel, right? The number of hours based off of payroll. And at the very top, and I didn't do a good job of drawing this triangle, this is where you get business outcomes. These are how do they reflect really in your ultimate scorecard, which is your P&L, your budgets. So this could be service gross margin because I need to use two KPIs to say how does this all basically benefit the business? Wow, I butchered spelling margin. My God,
We heard
someone
you, so hopefully that helps.
someone fire me. And the reason, by the way, I want to share it this way because whenever you go into these conversations, Amanda, where What we're talking about is like, how do we trade KPIs and how do we measure against each other? How do we even do benchmarking to know, is my MSP operating a way that I like? What we always miss is, what business outcome am I trying to drive that has a benefit to everybody? Because the only way I can truly have an ROI, which by the way, 9 times out of 10, when people say ROI, they're using it incorrectly, then why would I make an investment to improving a metric or a KPI or a data layer? Now, the only other thing that I'll put a spin on this, and then I'll get off my soapbox, is one, support rejection con, but two, how does this actually now deviate from your employees? Because this all starts to line up with your team, because typically it's at this metric layer that you have your individual contributors, right? These are your techs, your help desk people. These are the ones that are really helping drive the company forward. And KPIs are typical, like your senior level roles. So your tier 3 people, your account managers, sometimes middle management is in here. And it's your leadership team that's up here trying to manage business outcomes. By the way, if you're curious, in business school, whatever the hell that means, this is what you would call macro and microeconomics.
Yeah.
So I wanted to say this to start the entire conversation, Amanda, because I think what this allows us to do is all have shared definitions to KPY, the whole thing that you were marketing for this talk, that the KPI may be important, the KPI might not be, but we need to simplify so that everybody in the company knows that what they are doing, the paperwork they are doing, the systems you are using, have one reason to exist in the business. That's it. And that is to drive an outcome.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, the way that you broke it down is great. And that's one of the reasons why I'm really glad to hand it over to you, no problem. Because back to the point of making sure that people understand how they can affect it, if you draw that map the same way that you do when you create an automation, when you're trying to, say how a network works and showing the dependencies, it's the exact same idea. It's the exact same mental reverse engineering that you have to do to understand how everything works together. So it's something that you're capable of doing. Doesn't matter what level you're at, but it is something that the people at the top really need to understand, and at every level, really, how that works together, really. I
Well,
see
and
that.
what I find interesting about it is, if you were to ask any owner, like, hey, does your team know how their, I'm going to use KPI because people always love using that phrase. Do they know how their KPI contributes to the goal of the business? They all go, oh, yeah. Well, if I interviewed them right now, would they be able to say it? And then you
Mhm.
could see them kind of dance around the topic. And I don't say that to be spicy, because if you ask them, do you spend the time to tell them the reasoning and the justification on why that number is important? Usually it's the, well, I don't have time to go that deep. I don't have time to set those expectations or mentor my employees in that way. But then you see the employee go on Reddit and then bitch, complain, and moan that KPI is trying to micromanage them. And it's because no one took the time to work with an intelligent individual and say that, if you make this one number amazing, this is how it affects the rest of the company. And if
Yeah.
that number at the rest of the company is XYZ, we all get raises. We all get our increases every year. We all get bonuses. The company can grow and be healthy.
Yeah.
And what was interesting at my MSP, and I'm sure you did something similar, Amanda, the first thing that I taught all of my employees in my MSP was how to read a P&L. Day one, hour two.
Well, that is something that we're still in the process to deal with financial literacy. And I think that's because we do have a fair amount of younger staff. So there's a lot of conceptualization before we even get to a P&L, but that's a whole nother conversation. We'll do another talk about that one time, okay?
Well, plug for Empath. That course is already in there, so you can have it as part of the orientation,
This
because
is
I did that.
joint.
That conversation I had with all of my employees, I put it in there because I wanted to show them where they were on a P&L and how they, as an employee, affected the growth of the company. Because just like your customers, that first week of being with your company, whether an employee or a customer, is the most pivotal to reinforce that they made the right decision.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. So I moved on to the next slide because, you want the recipe, right? You want us to tell you exactly how to do it. The reality is there is none. right? And I know that there's probably plenty of schools of thought out there that will tell you that I'm wrong. I'm going to tell you that every single time I talk to someone, they're going to tell me how they're special or how they do something different or how their clients won't accept something. So I'm not going to try and sell you on the fact that there's a specific recipe. I don't want it to be too prescriptive because I don't want resistance from you or your team. I want you to understand some of these concepts, stuff like what Kyle just highlighted, and work towards it because everything is iterative in tech and everything takes time, and you have to get alignment, and like there's balance that's required in this. So what I want to do instead is, if you are used to being the maverick and plotting your course, let me do exactly what Kyle just said, which is to give you the literacy in terms of what it is you should be looking at in terms of the entire spectrum, and then for whatever your core values are, for whatever your mission is or your goals or outcomes, whatever those things are, you can decide what that looks like. But at least you have a better idea of how to, I don't know, tackle it, and take on the challenge of that. You have anything you want to add other than how cute the Frank is in the bus?
I do like it. I do like it. And you know, the only thing I would push back on is it's kind of it's like a chili cook-off. I don't
Yeah,
know if in Canada you guys have those.
sometimes.
Uh, or a crawfish boil down in Louisiana, or like there every culture has their version of everyone has their recipe, and it's a little bit different. And where I
Yes.
would push back, Amanda, is there is a recipe. However, it's going to be your recipe and you're going to salt it to your palate. And that recipe that you've created, it's something that not everybody will like, and that is okay. For example, I make chili and I am very proud of my chili recipe. That's why I use it as an example. However, my chili has a lot of poblanos, a lot of jalapenos, and I use a cornmeal to thicken it up versus flour. So it's very earthy. That's not for everybody. My wife, who's from Florida, she can't handle spice at all. So whenever I make chili, she's literally like, no, make me a pot, but leave all that shit out of it. Because my recipe is what I want it to be, just like my MSP. Amanda, if you heard how my MSP ran, you'd probably have been like, you are the most horrible person in the world.
No. I'm not
But,
judgmental like that. That's really all I'm saying.
well,
We're saying the same thing on two different sides of the coin. And I love to make it spicy because that's a good way for it to stick. But basically, what I'm saying is, I can't hand you my grandmother's recipe and have you make it the exact same because you were in the kitchen and you saw, like, or I was in the kitchen, I saw how she did things, or I knew that, she did this little small whatever that wasn't written down on the paper. So, like, applying what someone else's recipe is to your own isn't always a good way to do it. But you're so much better at saying it. So, really, I just like that we're getting along and agreeing just way.
well, and by the way, what I meant by like you won't like my recipe or don't like how I ran my company is because I had different ingredients.
Yes,
Regionally, there's even differences. Like
for
I
sure.
was in San Diego, a very large city in the US, and also we have a huge Hispanic and military presence. So you work with different things that are around you. Like whenever I see conversations about what's your price per seat? And you'll have one MSP be like, it's $295. And you go, no, it's not. Stop lying to people. But then you get the small MSP that's in the middle of nowhere. Kentucky goes, we're 110. And like everyone starts judging and pointing fingers at this little MSP in Kentucky. And he's like, you can tell the look on his face. He's like, guys, I wouldn't have a business if I was any more than $110 a seat because we're in the third most poor city in all of the US. By
For
the way,
sure.
that's a spin because Rural Tech Fund is in Kentucky, and they are the primary beneficiary of our benefits conference rejection con. Sorry,
Yeah.
I couldn't help myself, but the point stands the same as this is where I'm trying to support your effort of there is no recipe for everybody
Yeah.
because you don't know the environment that they exist in.
Yeah. And I mean, like, to that same end, the rent on a place in that rural town versus what you'd pay in San Diego is vastly different. The costs are going to be different, right? So like you need to keep that in mind, but the costs don't even just equate just to location. They equate to what kind of skill set do you have in house? Like there's a whole myriad of things that all speak to how you deliver service. Some people are comfortable outsourcing parts and some people want to keep it internal. All of those things are not something that I'm going to argue with. I just want you to know and be able to translate um, in a sustainable way, to be able to reproduce it. Because the reality is, most MSPs start off as one person. and then maybe grow to three, and those three people are all around each other and have osmosis. But when you start moving beyond that, in order to replicate and get to where you need to go for scale, you need to have these things nailed down so that you can translate it when you're not in the room. Your people need to understand what that means when you're not in the room.
Now, I will give one big asterisk on this. There is one saving grace in all of this, which is the definition of your business being healthy is pretty much the same for everybody.
Yeah.
It's more akin to getting blood work done at the doctor. We're all humans. We all need to have low cholesterol, low blood pressure, right? We all need to have our macros in order to where, we're not operating to be anemic because we're low on iron. So that is the nice thing, is that your business, that is comparative. What is your total gross margin, your revenue growth year over year, your EBITDA, which is a word I hate, but I'll use it because everyone understands it. But those things do not change. So the cool part about this exercise, Amanda, is, and I might be skipping ahead, so tell me to
You
shut up if
probably
I
are. I'm
need
like,
to,
I'm trying to figure out where you're going with this.
is if you start with the business outcomes,
Yeah.
because that does not change, that is a fixed variable, and you work your way back down to the contributor and the data that they need to help you manage, that is something that is probably the biggest eye-opening moment in my entire career. Of, if it's not something that affects a business outcome, you really got to force me to want to change it, because at the end of the day, that is the only thing that makes sure everyone keeps their job, gets paid fairly, and enjoys the freedoms and the benefits that we can provide them and their families.
Perfect. Okay, let me see where you stole my thunder already. We'll find out. So I didn't want to tell you that there's no recipe or one surefire click, like just here's the easy button and press it. I do want you to have hope, though, in the rest of this, and which we have already touched on some of this stuff, but we're going to talk about the KPIs that we each think that matter the most. And I talked in the beginning about drowning, and I really want to go through the idea of there's a difference between tracking and observing, how to get your teams aligned to outcomes, and really knowing where to start when you're tackling your goals. So this slide is pretty self-explanatory. I don't want to give Kyle any room because I want to make sure we get to the next stuff before we
I will
start
shut up.
talking.
I will shut up.
It's okay. It's okay. I just want to make sure that I see. I love what you're sharing, and I don't want to necessarily stop it, but I just want to also like bring in some of the other stuff. So I'll give you room in the next one because I really do want to talk about this part. Um, when I say have hope, I want to set you up for success. And I think to me, and maybe this is just my process, but I like to talk about how we can fail or how we could go off sideways so that when we're, keeping in mind where we're headed, that we could kind of plan for that from the beginning, mitigate those things from the beginning. And one of them is vanity metrics. I mean, we've both been at conferences, Kyle. You've always heard the person going, I have a $5 million MSP. They're giving you the top line revenue. They're telling you how amazing they are based on the most amount of money that they make, but they could be losing money. We don't know, right? Somebody could tell you that they have 100% CSAT and they only get 6 CSATs returned. And so what does that even mean if you have sent out 100 surveys? You have 94 customers that aren't telling you something, right? This is all performative reporting. And it doesn't actually move things along. It just makes you feel good and it doesn't actually have an impact. And, if you don't have, to Kyle's point before, if you don't have buy-in from your team on what it is you're doing, it's going to be an exercise in futility. Kyle, I had somebody come up to me and they asked me your favorite question yesterday at the roadshow that I was at. And they were like, I just can't get my techs to track their time. How do I do that? And I mean, when we talk about buy-in, that's probably the most classic example that people will give in terms of what metrics they're watching. And what would you say to that?
Oh, they can't, then they shouldn't work for you. I mean, that's the TLDR. I have fired more employees over timesheets than I would like to admit. However, I think where we're headed towards, and I think the important question, Amanda, is why is this relevant to the conversation? Is these performative metrics cannot influence your recipe.
Correct.
Because if you allow them to influence your recipe, you are going to be that MSP that goes, I am operational maturity level 4.95. And you're going to go, great. So you must be growing like 40% year over year and have like 20% on the bottom line. And they're going to look at you like, no, actually, we lost money last month when you really dig down into it.
Yeah.
And there is I think back to the phrasing back in grade school, putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Yeah.
Because there's a time and place to mature some things, and there's a time and place to ignore some things.
Yes.
And going to your question, Amanda, if you would have came up to me in 2017 in the height of my MSP's growth, and the first question you asked me is, what's your EBITDA? I would have looked at you and said 1%. And you would have been like, oh, I'm such a better MSP than Kyle. And I would have been like, yeah, we struggled because we grew $11 million top line revenue last year, and we had to hire 15 salespeople to get it done, but we got it done. And then everyone would have been like, oh, hold on, say that again. And I don't use that as a bragging moment, but I use that to influence the conversation that sometimes these comparative analyses get you in trouble. And honestly, if we really want to put a spicy take on this, this is like the dark side of community where sometimes knowledge share can become too much. And you see these in peer groups all the time of people trying to like almost like influence each other or coach each other too much and not having the confidence to say, yeah, I know, but I'm going to try it anyway because here's all the data I have to support my thesis.
I mean, you didn't just do that for no reason. You had a number that you wanted to achieve, and then you looked at the average output that you would get from the salesperson, and then you knew where you were going, and that's what was required. And then it would net you this much new based on what your close rate was, right? So, like, that was doing exactly what we're talking about. You
Very
had a
simple math
goal.
problem.
Very. And so like you just it's really that's really what I want to advocate for is the answer is all in numbers. It's all in numbers. And math sucks. We all like hate math to some degree. Maybe you're a math nerd and you love it. But for most of us, math is one of those things we're like, meh. But the math and the data will tell you so much that you want to know, right?
And you know
And
what's great?
go ahead.
Don't let the word math scare you because the
Mhm.
math for a business outcome is extremely simple. Like
Yeah.
a middle school kid that is 13 years old could figure out business outcome math because most of the time it's addition and subtraction. Like it is very, very simple. The lower you get into that pyramid, the more difficult things get.
Yeah. Yeah. So just the points here is the counterbalances. I'm going to keep saying it. I'm going to keep saying that it has to be tied to an outcome, but the counterbalance is to verify your data. The best example of that was the one I gave in my mind to the CSAT, people who congratulate and pat themselves on the back about it. You need to also be tracking how many people fill it out. And the moment that you hit below a percentage, you need to be reaching out for other feedback from your customers. You need to utilize your account managers for strengthening the relationships because something is wrong. Something is
I
wrong when
have
they're not talking.
98% CSAT. Well, you also have 6% net churn.
Yeah. Where like so look at the things that complement each other. Churn is another great way to look at it. That's a counterbalance to it. What's your churn rate? What's your form fill rate? Like these are all things that tell you whether or not you can trust that number. And that's really what I want people to get into the habit of doing is don't just congratulate yourself for a good number. Ask yourself if it's true. I mean, in the face of AI, which we had to mention it at some point during this conversation, these are the areas in which we will be able to deliver value. We will be able to do these cross analysis and use this critical thinking to question what the reality is, right? And those are small ways we can practice that skill. And if you track it, you can put it somewhere where you don't necessarily need to look at it. But if you sit down at your next quarterly meeting and you have a new goal, to Kyle's point about, do you need to look at those metrics in the sales team all the time? If you're not necessarily super focused on growth, maybe not, but if you track it and you have them report it, when you go for the next yearly meeting and you're going to make your decision on where you're heading and how much you want to grow, that data will be there for you to pull from. And in that moment, you can then use it because that's when it matters. Staring at it every day is probably not going to be helpful, but it all depends on where your focus is as a company.
I'll for those of you that do like an EOS or scaling up or a pinnacle, a top tip, if a KPI on your weekly leadership scorecard has gone more than a quarter without any discussion, you just need to pull it off of that list because now it's just performative management. Like if it doesn't create conversation, rage, disagreements, like if it doesn't make the L10 heated because it's not changing or improving, well, then it doesn't matter. You're measuring it just to measure it.
Yeah. All right. So, I told you we weren't going to give you a recipe, but I am going to give you this. To me, these are the puzzle pieces of things that you can look at, right? There are plenty of numbers within it, but I'll give you a few examples from each of these. So, in people, you could look at your own people's skill level. You could be looking at your churn rate in terms of employee engagement. For financial management, I mean, Kyle's done a great job of talking about some of those numbers. And then if you have more than one department, you can break it down into department in terms of what they're contributing in terms of workload or their efficiency, whether or not they're hitting targets, because every department should have targets. And then separate from that, which seems like it would be related, but it's not, is the service delivery itself. Like, are you meeting what it is you've promised in terms to your customers, and is your service team healthy in terms of their skill set, what they need to have as far as tools or everything to do with how you deliver service. And then strategy and governance. So to Kyle's point about having those metrics and numbers and knowing whether or not, you know, you're using them, there's conflict in your level 10 meetings and stuff, like you need to also keep track of that. And on the governance side, are you doing the regulatory things that you should be doing? Just having a quick check-in about that. And then the operations is kind of the accountability for all those things together. And I'm not suggesting that you need to track all of these things right now and do all of it right now. I'm not saying that at all. You should track what matches the scale that you're at. But I would say, if you want to practice and you're getting better and your MSP is growing and this is something where you want to stretch a little bit, you could pick something in each one of these. But you must make sure that it matches your core values or any of your current goals. We're going to keep repeating it. It's got to tie back to an outcome that you've already set. I'm going to give an example. This is something I hear all the time, that service is screaming, we need more bodies. It's too overwhelming. It's too, whatever. This is like a constant issue with help desk, right? But the finances don't support that. There are many ways that you can tackle it and figure out what's happening. Maybe it's a question of training. It could be the agreement profitability. Maybe you're not making any money because your agreements are not set in a way where you're going to be able to capture the revenue from it. They're costing more to support than what you thought. And perhaps there's a lack of documentation. When you don't have documentation, you can't necessarily scale processes across a team. That causes rework and that has a cost to it, right? So like all of these things, I want you to think about it in the same thing that Kyle talked about in terms of the triangle in the beginning. Everything is all layered like that, and you can usually trace it back. So depending on what you're struggling with, what you're hearing as feedback points, this is where I would say maybe start small with stuff like this to start building this culture. All right.
I
Are you?
would, if you could elaborate for me,
Yeah.
and maybe this might be the one area that maybe we have a little bit of disagreements.
Mm.
Elaborate on core values here, because core values is an interesting one to put here because it's very subjectively oriented, and it finding a way to have it be a driver is an interesting concept to me, because at the end of the day, that's kind of like an on the bus, off the bus thing. It's not a, I'm going to see maybe much of a way to, like, not much of a, I don't know. If you could explain that to me, I would really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
sure. I mean, I think it's great because if you have that question, likely somebody else has that question. So when you're thinking about, let's say your outcome was to make your help desk more profitable, right? But your core value, somewhere in your core value says that you want to give a client a level of experience and understanding of their business, right? In order to set that outcome and to have that be your goal, you could say, well, I could outsource the entire department. I could have an external company or a person in the Philippines take care of that, and it would be cheaper. And that would help us hit our goal, right? But I would not suggest that if you have, as part of your experience, that people know your name, they have this whatever. And I know that there's plenty of people that in the outsourcing situation work well, but I'm just saying for some people, they might want to see that person show up on site. They might want to see that person as be the person who they could shake their hand. And if that's something, which I will tell you in my particular business is important. I have a lot of farmers and agricultural people, and they have this mentality and like way of doing business where they really want to know the people that they're dealing with and be able to drop by and see them. And so for me, it's never been part of the conversation to outsource. Don't judge anybody for doing it. Don't think it's wrong, but because of our core values, it is wrong for our business. So in that way there, I'm saying that whatever you're setting these outcomes, you need to keep those in mind.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And I think that's to the conversation. I won't name the MSP that we were talking about when we were doing this planning. I think that's really what I heard from that MSP as well, that sometimes these metrics can feel grating to them because it doesn't fit with how they want to do something different. So I'm saying in your recipe, consider what's important. If you're from Sicily and you know this is a kind of pepper that you use in Sicily, like maybe don't change that part. Like, you know what I mean? And then your chili. I'm going back to the chili analogy. It was a really good one, Kyle.
Once in a while, those come to me.
Yeah. All right. If you build it, it will come. So I know it can seem daunting. Um, I hate to use the analogy with empath here about, eat the elephant one bite at a time, but poor Emmy. But realistically, these things will happen if you just take it in bite-sized chunks. You got to state the outcome, break it apart, have clear milestones, tie it back to the things that will make the change, right? So those numbers that we were talking about before, and that way you can find the number for the person to track. The cadence that you review these things and your targets should be set. That way somebody knows what they're working towards. It doesn't mean you can't adjust it midstream, but it does mean that they have an idea of what good looks like, right? And you want to be super descriptive. When we are doing the exercise, for example, in our L10s about, where do we see ourselves in 5 years? It's not I mean, this is at least how we interpret it. It's not just we want blank amount of revenue. It's also, what does it feel like? What does it look like? Who is there? What are the roles? And like get super descriptive for these kinds of goals because people need to have that buy-in and they will do that if you almost story tell to the point where they are attached to that outcome. If you just flatly say something, it's really hard sometimes for people to get behind that. So you want to make sure that they're attached emotionally to it because people show up and put the work in when they feel like they're doing something meaningful. And nobody wants to work in a way that doesn't feel like it's got purposeful.
Yeah, and this is where radical transparency can be the most terrifying, but also the single easiest thing to remove ambiguity from your business. And what I recognized at my MSP when we went to an open P&L model where anyone could see how we were doing, it forced me to teach my team every single month, even down to the tier ones. Here is where we performed last month. Here are the decisions that had these outcomes. Here are the decisions that had those outcomes. And what it removed, what's crazy enough, and I'm going to come back to this, it removed the timesheet friction.
Yeah.
Completely. And it was an unexpected consequence because now all of my employees, they went, oh shit, if I don't put time into the system, my company won't know how much profit they make on a customer, which means they can't manage the customer, which means that the company's profitability may go down. And if the company's profitability goes down, we won't be able to create new roles, give raises, all of these other positive consequences. And we had to do a lot of cleanup in order to get to transparent P&Ls. However, it removes, like you mentioned, the internal friction of why am I wasting my time on this? Why am I having to do this? Because in our heart of hearts, that is what we mean when we say put your time into tickets. What we're saying is I can't manage our profitability. I can't manage if we can hire the next employee even, or I can't objectively say should you feel like you're burning out or not, because sometimes those sentiments in your team are subjective. Me working hard is a lot harder than what some other employees may feel is working hard. So when you have to remove that subjectivity, and I do agree with you, and it's hard to put into words this idea of if you build it, it will happen. Um, but if you know the direction you're going, you know the numbers associated that measure to that outcome, you can then ask yourself, do I have the ability to work that many hours or have a team that large or move that fast? Everything now becomes a part of the plan. And if you go, oh man, going from 2 to 100 million, that means I need to work 80-hour weeks and sit in 4 seats and hire 20 people this year. And you in your heart of hearts know that that's not possible. Well, then you can pull it back. Maybe we'll do 50 million. Maybe we'll do 10 million. Maybe we'll go to 8 million. Because the other thing that really funnels into this business outcome, if you went one layer level higher, what the hell do you want out of your business?
Yeah.
Because if you're just looking for $500,000 a year in salary, you could hit a $3 million MSP and make that easily.
Yeah.
Hell,
Not worried about
probably a
growth
$2
at all.
million MSP.
Yeah.
So you don't need to grow. But if you are psychotic like me, you want to grow just to grow because I don't care about money, but I only know pushing myself. I'm competitive. So there's going to be this whole other thing of going back to the recipe. If I like super hot chili just because I like flavor, or in my case, I can't smell anything. So the only way I taste anything is if it's spicier than hell. Well, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. I mean, the reason why I used the word build it was for a reason. I didn't say if you proclaim it, it will happen. If you dictate it, it will happen. It's you have to build it. It is not something that you just walk in and ta-da, you have to put the like anything in business. There are blocks that have to be layered. And all of these pieces that we're talking about today are all part of that. So,
But that's where also the dangers of pure benchmarking get dangerous because they may force upon you the sentiment of I have to grow or I'm a bad MSP. When realistically, if you're making that $500,000 check and you don't like to work, like you're just going to my heart of hearts, I'd rather be fishing every day or
lifestyle
knitting or
business is still
reading.
a business.
I can't stand the stigma behind lifestyle business, to be
It's
quite
still a
honest, because if
business.
you're making $1 million a year, you have a pretty damn good lifestyle. Just because you don't want to grow is actually a risk management process of going, no, because that $1 million a year from that lifestyle business is paying for all this other shit that I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So to the KPIs before I get down the rabbit hole of lifestyle businesses, because there's a whole thing about that. They should be treated like signals. Like, when you're driving and you see someone's behavior, when you're trying to solve a problem, when you're troubleshooting, there's things that happen that are flags, right? And you should use your KPIs as indicators of where the solution might be, right? That's why we say track without observing. You only need to dig into it if you need to know more. If you sit down at your meeting and you know that you want to grow in a certain way, or you want to fix a problem, or you get a really, a couple of really nasty customer complaints where they all have the same thread and there's a problem there, then you can go and dig into the data, right? To capture the full data, but don't act on everything right away because you're going to be overwhelmed. You're going to feel like nothing is good. Just be selective, right? And really use the signals of what's happening and what you're hearing between your account managers and clients directly as where you should look to be able to get to the solution.
Yeah. Start with the problem and work your way back.
So I don't like using the word stupid. It's not my favorite. But so I said keep it simple, silly. I think a really good place to start would be to have three. I mean, I call them KPIs, but you call them data, whichever one you'd prefer, Kyle, in terms of the lower level, in terms of each person
Don't worry about the phonetics
terminology.
things.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
needs to be three things that every employee manages and
right.
keep it about that.
Yeah, and it should be by the role, right? They should manage it individually, but it should be assigned by the role so that you're not duplicating the work where you don't need to. I would say each department should have an outcome, and then one goal the company is working towards, and they should all tie together, and largely revenue based. This helps reduce the noise. I remember the first time we did the exercise, and I think which one is it that has it where it's like the one number, I think it's scaling up. It's the one number that the whole company should be rowing towards.
Oh, yeah, the power of one, which I think is Jim Collins.
No, I don't remember. But in any case, it was either scaling up or something. It doesn't really matter which methodology it was. The point being, we found that really like crazy because like, how can marketing affect this, and how can this one affect this? There's actually ways to do it. You just have to make sure that it's something that each person can affect and then translate it for their role so that they can understand how their department, how them individually actually contributes towards it and towards the percentage overall that getting done.
Well, it's a good smoke test too, because if your company goal is to grow revenue and you see your service manager checked out and on all those conversations and just doesn't want to participate because they think they can't help or they don't want to help, that says a lot, because
Yeah.
there's many ways a service person can contribute, aka manage profitability, because I'm going to go hire 4 more salespeople that rely on that profitability being high so we don't run in the red, right?
Yeah.
Or can we have those service techs that are sitting on their hands right now do some discovery in our clients' networks for account management to go chase? There's so many ways that everyone in a company contribute. And I love that you pointed this out. And it's honestly, this really becomes a, is your team bought in? And if they are not, and you have gone through all of these exercises, I'll be quite honest. The only way to solve it is, there's an old proverb, those that got you here won't get you there. And you need to have that tough conversation. It doesn't have to be gross. It doesn't have to be mean. It doesn't have to be bad. Of, hey, man, it doesn't seem like you care. And I want to support you. And if that means you need to move on to a new company where you do just manage IT infrastructure, I would love to help you find an enterprise IT manager job. However,
Yeah.
I need someone that is really trying to help us grow. And if you're not it, totally okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's such a misnomer too that technical people can't affect profitability when so much of what we do is literally just reselling their services. So, I mean, yes, you definitely can. You can be more efficient.
Your
You can be
people are the
training. You can,
product.
yeah, like literally, your time is the product. Like, I don't want to
I
say the
don't care
people
how
are the
you,
product. I don't want to like I'm selling them, but yes, I know what you're
but
saying.
you are. I've done this exercise so many times where I tell people, like, if you were to shut your eyes and imagine a retail outlet as your MSP, and you have customers coming in to buy something, what they are literally buying is a person on the shelf to help them.
Yeah.
And if that product quality isn't good, you're going to get a return. They're
Yeah.
returning your people. So if they're returning your people, what does that say about the person or the product?
Yeah. Okay, I'm looking at the time and I'm going, I want to make
Yeah,
sure
yeah,
to
yeah.
say our things. So, Kyle, take it away. This is for you, but try to keep it to 2 minutes if you can.
Dang it. High level, there's 2 KPIs as a business outcome perspective. All CEOs need to pay attention. And there's a third one that triangulates everything into business health. And I'm going to shortcut it for you. The first is revenue growth rate. Essentially, how much did you grow total top line revenue year over year? So if I was $1 million last year and I'm $1.5 million this year, I grew by 50%. Most of the time, on average, it's anywhere between 10 and 20% if you want me to shortcut it for you. But that is something I need to know in my heart of hearts, because that tells me, are we at least always adding? The other one that's extremely important is net revenue retention. This is more complicated, and I could spend a whole hour talking about this metric, but this just basically says the recurring revenue in my business grew from last year to this year. So if I have a customer paying me $1,000 a month on managed services last year, that's $12,000 in a year. If the next year they pay me $15,000 because I gave them an increase, or I sold them add-ons or upgraded them to a premium plan, that means I was over 100% net revenue retention. High level, when you combine those two, what that says is that my business is growing and my customers like me so much that they stick around and pay me more money. The third in this entire mix, and actually it's number 3 in the list of importance, is the EBITDA number. It's the net profitability number. That basically says that I can grow revenue and make my customers happy with my product and services and still maintain to put healthy numbers on the bottom line. I share all of this because once you know those 3 and you really focus them on outputs of what the company is going to perform, all of the other KPIs, metrics, data, and systems fall in line for those employees who really don't have the attention span to manage more than 3 to 5 objectives.
Great. And I think the percentage part was really important too, because it's really easy to sell a large project, or when you have like a when Windows 11, migrations and stuff like that, to look at that number and have it influence your overall profit. But that's not sustainable. It's not guaranteed, and it just fluctuate from year over year. And those should be the nice to haves, not the guaranteed whatever. Or you should be projecting how much your projects department is doing so that you can plan for that as
And
well.
I'll be quite honest, I had those years where we made the year because of a big project. We would
Yeah.
have missed it, but we signed one awesome project in October and we went from 90% revenue to budget to 102% revenue to budget because of one project. Those moments happen, But if you have that net revenue retention number, something that's reportable, if you ever go to sell your MSP, they're never going to be able to dock you on business valuation for that because now you have the evidence to say, Mr. Private Equity guy, look at this number, which completely says your statement was false. And that really becomes the narrative for a lot of these TLDR. If you have these numbers in check, no one can boss you around when you go to sell your MSP.
That's what you want. Okay, so mine, I'm not saying that Kyle's aren't important, but if I was going to pick ones to go after that, because I'm operations based, I'm a firm believer that you should be tracking the current backlog across your entire service department. We assign budget hours for all of our tickets so that when we're looking at anything in the help desk, we can know how many hours are outstanding. And if I have more hours than my current team can handle, then I know I've got a personnel issue, whether that means the person needs training or whatever the case may be, or we need to, maybe exit somebody, whatever the case is. We have a clear picture. And it's really difficult for someone to say, oh, I feel so busy, I feel so busy. And then you look at them and you say, listen, in an average week, each person can handle this much. This is how much we have outstanding. It might feel busy, but that's about like how you prioritize your time, and I can help with that. It just gives me a really good picture of where the problem is in terms of resource allocation. And then I really believe in pumpkin planning. You need to know your agreement utilization. You need to understand how your clients are using you. If you are charging them 5K per month and it costs you 7,000 to service them, you're not running a business, you're running a charity. And I'm not really interested in that because I'm not a not-for-profit and I don't get the not-for-profit benefits. So that's pretty clear to me.
I do
Um,
love that I picked up two business outcomes and then you picked a KPI and a metric because all of ours really come
they
together
go
to where
together.
you picked what the contributor level should be, the service manager level should be, and then I picked that COO or CEO level should be. So we complemented each other pretty well.
Let's go start an MSP. No, I'm kidding.
I've thought about it.
So where do I start? My advice for you, you should have some feedback forms. You should do them internally and externally. Don't make them onerous, don't make them long. You can keep them as simple as start, stop, keep so that you get feedback from where how things are working. You can find out what your pain points are. I, being a person who followed traction, I'm sure Kyle will say something about it, but I think doing a SWOT analysis is also a good exercise to be able to understand, where things could be a strength and where they could be a weakness and where you have opportunity to grow. And I say start with money. Everything is easier with it. And what I mean by that is that Kyle is infinitely right by what he was saying. You need to make sure that your profitability is there, and that you're growing the way that you need to. Because if you have the money to be able to play with, you can affect way more change in the business for all the other cool shit that you can do. Because without money, it's survival, and that's not where you do your best work.
And also, I'll add one deep cut on that. When you don't start with money, you have to lead with bullshit because you as an owner in your heart of hearts are making all of these decisions because of money. And then now if you're trying to say I want to have this conversation and not talk about the real reason that I'm making this proclaimment or this expectation setting, your employees now are starting to go, why is this so convoluted, or why is he trying to make us do this thing? They start to ask the why, and now you're in a position where you have to withhold it from them
Yeah, not ideal.
or
Okay.
dance around it.
I will extend by a couple minutes if you guys have questions. This is where I open it up and say we can take the um, lovely slide off if anybody wants to just unmute themselves, which I think you should be able to do, and ask a question. We're both here to answer. Otherwise, you can pop it in chat if you don't feel comfortable asking. Either way is good. But I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. It's great.
Chat's been quiet, I will say. uh, Randall, Nick, Miguel, Marius, Larry, Kyle.
Jen,
Damn. Come on,
that's
Kyle.
Kyle.
Joe, Jerry,
No
Jack,
one mute
Bobby,
Austin.
Ashley, Amira, Amanda. Oh, and, yeah, Amanda. Someone asked a question. If you don't have questions, though, I am on LinkedIn. I'll put my LinkedIn in chat. Feel free to DM me. No unmute option.
Yeah, so I just learned that today, which is great. I'm still learning just like everybody else, but feel free to put your questions in the chat, like just written. Um, and I'm sure, like if you find Kyle, I wish I had my little LinkedIn handy. Maybe I'll grab it here and I'll share it.
You learn to memorize it.
Oh, no, thank you. I memorized too much stuff as it is. Let's see if I can get it from mobile.
Amanda, work harder.
That was the look. Yeah. For those of you who don't remember the first slide, the sheer amount of stuff that I do, I also have two children on top of that, so I'm not busy at all, was my joke
Yeah, I got
yesterday.
a 2-year-old. I got a 2-year-old.
Yeah, when they're like
Ooh.
Jonathan, that's a great question. It was answered, but that's okay. It's totally fine to ask it again. Um, I think that we covered that in the last half. So when you're watching, I would go back and watch that. You'll get a copy of the recording. But I'm happy for you to take it away with what you had said, Kyle, because I think that's pretty relevant. And since I only want to extend by 2 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor.
Yeah, Jonathan, discovering which KPIs are most important, you have to start off with what do you want out of your business? Or, and if you're not the owner, if you're like a service manager or an ops person or a sales manager, you need to have the conversation with the owner, brass tacks. What do we want to achieve this year? And as Amanda said, start with money. You have to go, if it is this revenue target, if it is this bottom line target, if it is this gross margin target, we need to start there in order to then go into the microeconomics, the data that's in your PSA or in your CRM, and go, what data in there is important to manage so that we can influence that bigger business outcome. You can't do it the other way around, because if you start with utilization or you start with backlog, now what's going to happen is you're going to be like that tree in my backyard where it just grows in whatever direction it wants to because there's nothing helping manage its growth. And now it looks like this wacky tree that has one branch that I swear to God goes 10 feet in one in north direction and another branch that goes like it's disgusting and I need to cut it down. But beyond that, I'm not allowed to in California. But anywho, that would be my recommendation is if you can't anchor into one or two money numbers that the business needs to improve by the end of the year, also make it time bound, very time bound. End of year, end of quarter, end of next year is even somewhat acceptable, but I think that's stretching it a little bit too far. You can't figure out the rest of them.
Yeah. To your point, Jonathan, I think because we have to wrap up here, what I would suggest you do is just before I close it, maybe confirm for me once you've got it. Both Kyle and I have put our LinkedIn in there. I rarely respond to LinkedIn messages, but I will tell you this, if you reach out to me, I'd be happy to walk you through it and have a chat with you about it. So you got it? Is a thumbs up from you? So I would just recommend doing that because I think there's probably a lot of knowledge that we could help in terms of whatever you're seeing in your business and kind of be with the point in the right direction. Though Kyle
And
uses
Randall,
that
what's
for
it?
money though, so I don't know.
Randall, what's in it for me? Well, if you're an employee, you get to keep your job and have a company that possibly can pay you a lot more money than they pay you today. If you are an owner, well, you're building value in your business, which means eventually that becomes your retirement when you sell it or give it to somebody else to run, or you're putting more money in your bank account every month. So I've given you plenty of good reasons there. I will be the first to tell you if you're a service manager and you're saying that thing might be a better company that you have to work for.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, friends, for joining. Thank you, Kyle, for your time.
Thanks for having me.
I look forward to making new friends with everybody on LinkedIn. Please come and find us. Take care, everyone.